Good day, everyone. This is Cessna 152, video number 2. I've had a lot of requests to talk more about the communication on the radio, so that's what I'm going to do right now. This is really just to get people a little bit more familiar with the radio, a little bit more comfortable. If you're new to flying, that all sounds like a bunch of jargon. Hopefully this video will help you out a little bit. I have a limited amount of time because these GoPros will only run for so long, so without further ado, I'm going to start taxiing from Lima Row, which is actually my hangar, shared hangar with a couple other friends right now, and I need to get the ATIS. For those unfamiliar, that is an automatic terminal information service, and it's abbreviated as ATIS, basically a continuous broadcast of aeronautical information in busier terminal areas, and it's got essential information like the weather, active runways, available approaches, NOTAMs, things like that. And at this airport, the ATIS frequency is 119.62.
Central Tower, information Romeo, time 2050 Zulu, wind 030 at 11, weather better than 5005, temperature 21, dew point 10, altimeter 3014. Visual approach runway 31 in use. NOTAMs, runway 220 closed. Central VOR out of service. Approach sites runway 31 out of service. Taxiway Bravo 2 closed between taxiway Bravo and the overflow ramp. Use caution for bird activity vicinity of the airport runways and taxiways. Use caution for drone activity when the Central class out the service area below 400 feet. All aircraft read back, runway assignment, and hold short instructions with your call sign. Advise. Initial contact, you have Romeo.
So we have Romeo. Now I'm going to go to St. Augustine ground. Normally you'd want to write these frequencies down, make sure you have an airport diagram wherever you go. You're going to need to know ground frequency, approach, tower. At this airfield, since this is my home airfield, I have them memorized. I am on ground now. I'm holding short of the first taxiway, and I'm going to just do a quick lap in the pattern so you can kind of see how closed traffic works. And then eventually I'm going to leave the airspace, and then what I'm going to do is demonstrate coming back into the airspace. So always remember who you are, where you are, what you want to do. Right now I'm on ground. I want to taxi to runway 31, that's the active runway from the ATIS, and then I'm going to get directions to taxi to 31 from ground, and I want closed traffic, which means I want to stay in the pattern. The other thing is, it's information Romeo.
Ground 0321, Papa Mike with Romeo via our departure to the southwest.
And that's another thing that you want to give them is make sure that you have the correct information, which is updated every hour. I'm going to state my full call sign, Cessna 5165 Bravo. Unless abbreviated by ground or tower, I will never abbreviate it until they do. Once they abbreviate it, then I can just say Cessna 65 Bravo, and that'll become who I am instead of the full call sign. St. Augustine ground, Cessna 5165 Bravo is at Lima Row and Delta, ready to taxi for closed traffic to 31 with Romeo.
65 Bravo, runway 31, taxi via Delta Bravo.
Taxi via Delta Bravo to 3165 Bravo. Alright, so it's that simple. I didn't have a lot of taxiway directions there. Literally all I'm doing is making a right onto Delta, making sure that my controls are in the correct position for the wind, and I'm going to go to Bravo and do a run up real quick. I am not a flight instructor. I'm just trying to help people out, maybe build some confidence on the radio when you're first getting started. I remember what it was like to be a little bit afraid of the radio, and hopefully this will help you out and make you a little bit more comfortable, because once you get the hang of it, it's a lot easier than you think. I really don't understand why they have us taking off away from the wind right now. Oh, it's kind of weird. Alright, I'm going to do a quick run up, make sure everything's good. For this particular video, I'm just sticking to radio communication. If everything's good with my run up, I'm going to the runway now. I'm going to hold short of 31. Obviously, I've been on ground, so but as soon as I'm holding short and I'm ready for takeoff, that's when we're going to switch to tower. I'm now holding short of the line. I'm going to switch to tower. As soon as I get a chance to talk, there's other people talking, but as soon as I get a chance, all I need to do is get cleared to take off. Just going to be, this is 65 Bravo, I'm at 31, ready for takeoff. That simple.
Notify you of who I was.
One Golf Victor, thank you.
St. Augustine Tower, Cessna 5165 Bravo is holding short at 3-1, ready for takeoff.
Cessna 5165 Bravo, St. Augustine Tower, no delay, make right close traffic, report midfield, runway 31, clear for takeoff.
No delay, clear for takeoff on 3-1, Cessna 65 Bravo.
From 1 Papa Mike, turn right on course.
Alright, so he said without delay, which means we need to get up. Don't dilly-dally on the runway. Take off. Don't take too much time to take off. Let's get up in the air and then we'll chat more. Pretty much a direct crosswind right now.
St. Augustine Tower, 951 Golf Victor, now clear of your airspace after 1.
1 Golf Victor, frequency change approved, good day.
Under that frequency change approved for 951 Golf Victor.
And it is bumpy. We're running a right traffic pattern right now. Left is pretty standard, but the reason that we're running a right pattern right now is because of where the tower is located. So basically,
Papa Mike, frequency change
I'm in closed traffic. I'm staying in the pattern right now. And all you have to do is tell them when you're midfield. They're going to give you directions on whether you're cleared for touch and go or whether you need to do something else. All they're trying to do is maintain traffic separation. Again, I'm just going to do 1 touch and go and then depart to the south. And I'm just about midfield right now. St. Augustine Tower, Cessna 65 Bravo is midfield for touch and go and then would like to depart to the southeast.
Cessna 65 Bravo, roger. After the touch and go, would you like a right or a left turnout?
A left turnout, 65 Bravo.
5165 Bravo, wind at 070 at 9er, runway 31, cleared touch and go, then turn left on course.
Runway 31, clear touch and go, then left on course. Cessna 65 Bravo. All I'm really doing is repeating what they're saying. That way they know I heard it correctly. And that's pretty much how the communication goes throughout. Tell them what you want to do. They're going to give you directions. And then you need to repeat what they say to make sure that it's telling them that you understood them. And that you have it all correct. Alright, car repeats on, landing lights on. Put the flaps down, 10 degrees. And again, closed traffic. Tower knows where I'm at. I don't need to worry about telling them anything right now or what I'm doing. I am in the pattern, trying to meet the runway here, but I'm getting pushed pretty far, so I didn't do a good job turning final, but that's okay. Quite a crosswind right now. Quick touch and go, and then we're going to leave the airspace and come back in.
And Tower Flyers Air 758, holding short of 3-1, ready for close traffic.
Tower 758, St. Augustine Tower.
I'll work it down here,
right
ground effect.
Runway 31, clear for takeoff, wind 070 at 8.
Wheels are down.
Alright, right close traffic.
Power Pete in, flaps up.
Takeoff, runway 31,
I'm going to go right back up. Keep the ailerons into the wind.
Flyer 758, you can expect this to be your last pattern for runway 31. We're going to switch to runway 13. We're just waiting for a Cessna on a 7 mile straight into runway 31 on an approach.
Copy that for 758.
That's funny you mentioned that, because I was wondering about that. Like, the wind's pretty much from behind me. So what they're doing is they're changing runway directions now. That way we're going more into the wind. Going into that left turnout now. Once I do leave the airspace, tower's going to say freak change approved. I'm going to say frequency change approved, 65 Bravo. And that means that I can change to a different frequency. When you're not near another airspace, you could just basically go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like common traffic or something, or listen, or just to keep on the tower. If you're going to stay, whatever the nearest airport is, it's good to be on whatever tower that is.
Remember 5165 Bravo, frequency change approved.
Cessna 5165 Bravo, frequency change approved. That's exactly what I'm talking about. He has cleared me now to change frequencies. I don't need to be on the tower anymore. I'm exiting the airspace. And I'm flying just over downtown St. Augustine, coming up over the lighthouse. That is one of the landmarks that they know. So they're going to know exactly where I'm at. But generally you want to report 10 miles from the airspace is the general rule of thumb for reporting to that tower. And this is a Class Delta. And so typically you'd report 10 miles out, but I'm in a Cessna 152. I'm going very slow, and I'm going to turn around and go back into the wind. And so there's no issue with me reporting at the lighthouse, and you can use landmarks as long as the tower knows what that is. Now, when I'm coming into an airspace, another thing you want to do is you want to check the information again. So I'm going to go back to that, check it.
Advise, initial contact, you have Sierra. Sonoxy Tower information, Sierra, time 2125 Zulu, special observation, wind 080 at 12, weather better than 5005, temperature 21, dew point 10, altimeter 30.
Okay, so now I know the wind's 080 at 12, I've got it written down, and I know my runway is going to be 13 because they switched it right when I was leaving. And so I'm going to tell them what I want to do. I'm just going to say full stop, requesting full stop. Now I'm not trying to go in the pattern again. I just want to go and land and taxi back to the hangar. So I'm going to say who I am, Cessna 5165 Bravo, and the reason you don't have to say November is if you say your type, you don't need to say November. You could say Cessna, and that actually helps them out a little bit to know what kind of equipment you're in. The other thing you want to say is your altitude, right? Distance from the airport. In this case, I passed the lighthouse, so I'm now going to use the St. Augustine Beach Pier. How many miles you are, and then what you want to do, and then that you have the current information, which is now Sierra. That's all there is to it. So I'm going to start turning around. I'll check my traffic. Do a turn around here. You don't have to do anything unless you're going to go into an airspace. No, you can just fly the airplane. Now I want to go back into the airspace, class Delta.
Wind 070 at 8.
Okay, so the wind keeps changing. So yeah, it's a little gusty. Alright, so I'm just over the St. Augustine Beach Pier now. St. Augustine Tower, Cessna 5165 Bravo is over the St. Augustine Beach Pier now at 1000, inbound for full stop with Sierra.
Cessna 5165 Bravo, St. Augustine Tower, ident.
Alright, so this is perfect. He asked me to ident. I'm just going to hit this button. That's the ident button.
Cessna 65 Bravo, I don't have you on radar. I'm going to write downwind runway 13, report midfield.
It's going to be a right downwind for 13 and I'll report midfield, Cessna 65 Bravo. So he asked me to ident. For some reason it wasn't working because it is on alt. And I hit the button. But I guess it didn't work for him. Who knows? When you hit that button, it'll help them identify you. That's why, in short, it's called ident. And what that does is it lights you up on their radar a little bit. Maybe it'll change colors, it'll make it blink. Something to help them know which airplane you are on their radar. Another beautiful day in St. Augustine, the oldest city in the U.S., oldest continually occupied settlement. I'm happy to now be going into the wind when I land instead of away from it. There's really not much to this, guys. I know it could be overwhelming. In my first video, I talked about a lot of things, but I didn't touch on the radio, and so I just don't want people to never, not fly because of it. You can do it. You just have to get comfortable. And I remember when I first started flying.
Flyers there, 758, holding short of.
Remember when I first started flying, my
ready for departure.
instructor was like, "Don't worry about the radio. I'll handle the radio. You just focus on flying the airplane." And that's exactly right. And I kind of eased my way into it,
Report midfield, clear for takeoff.
Eventually, you make that first call to taxi to the runway, and when you get it right, it feels really good, and you just start getting the hang of more and more calls that you need to make. When I'm coming back into the pattern, I'm going to be in a right traffic for 13, but the regular pattern traffic is to the left, and I'm coming in at 45 degrees, entering the pattern at 45 degrees. Another pretty standard thing you need to get used to. I'm going to be on a right downwind for 13, which means I'll be turning a right base, and then a right final for 13. I'm going really slow because I'm in a Cessna 152 going into the wind. Let me know if you guys have any questions about any of this. I've done the best I could to answer some questions from the first video, and it's been really cool sharing my aviation adventure with you guys. I'm working on restoring a Valenka Cruise Air from the 40s right now. So very excited about that. I'm very, very much into aviation history. Check out some of those videos if you're interested in that project. I've also been flying a Taylorcraft. If there's one airplane slower than this one, it might be a Taylorcraft. Cessna 65 Bravo's on the downwind for 13, about midfield now.
Cessna 65 Bravo, runway 13, clear to land, wind 070 at 9er.
Clear to land on 13, Cessna 65 Bravo. That's it. Clear to land, 13, basically just get to fly the airplane now, focus on landing, and then exiting the runway as quickly as possible, and then I'll be switching to ground, back to ground, because we'll be on the ground. I'm coming in nice and high right now to try to stay above the trees here. There'll be a little less turbulent coming in if I stay high.
Dallas, cockpit 887, number 1, holding short runway 113 at Bravo 1.
Skyflight 887, St. Augustine Tower, hold short, runway 13, intersection departure, Bravo 1, landing traffic.
You have that traffic inside, Skyflight 887, hold. Now hold short 13.
7, hold short, runway 13.
Hold short 13, Bravo 1, flight 887.
Alright. Get in the ground effect here, start working my way down. Hold the throttle. Got to turn my carb heat on, so sorry about that. For all you super pilots. And touchdown.
65 Bravo, Fable, turn right at Bravo 2, contact ground point 17.
Turning right at Bravo 2, contacting ground, 65 Bravo, thank you. Alright, so now I'm going to switch to ground. All I got to do is tell them where I'm at, where I want to go. So I'm at Bravo 2 and just exited 13. I'm at Bravo and Bravo 2. St. Augustine ground, Cessna 5165 Bravo's at Bravo 2 and Bravo to taxi over to Lima Row with Sierra.
5165 Bravo, set up to ground, turn left on Bravo, cross runway 2, hold short runway 6.
I'm sorry, I actually need to change that. I need to taxi to Florida Aviation, 65 Bravo.
5165 Bravo, roger, turn left on Bravo, cross runway 2, hold short runway 6.
Left on Bravo, cross 2, hold short 6, Cessna 5165 Bravo. And see what I did there? I messed up, and all you gotta do is just say, hey, look, I messed up. That's not actually where I'm going. I need to go somewhere else. Not a big deal, as long as no one else is talking. What I do is I have abbreviations, because you gotta write pretty fast when you're doing when you're getting information from the tower, especially for IFR flying, flight following. You'll notice that many times they'll be talking really fast and you need to write it all down pretty fast. So I've come up with a couple of abbreviations that have helped me out. Like when he said left on Bravo, I immediately do an LB, left Bravo. Then when he said cross 2, I do an X2, and then I have for the hold short, I use an HS. So it's LB X2 HS6, hold short 6.
Expect Jacksonville approach control.
And those abbreviations have helped me out a lot with taxi direction.
65 Bravo, cross runway 6, turn right on Delta, go down to Delta 4 and hold short runway 6.
That's cross 6 and then right on Delta, down to Delta 4 and hold short 6. Cessna 65 Bravo.
65 Bravo, you'll turn right at Delta 4, cross the approach into 6 to the Atlantic ramp.
That was right at Delta 4, across 6 to the ramp, 65 Bravo. Delta 3, don't want to turn there, going down to Delta 4. And if you're unfamiliar with the taxiway of any airport, make sure you have a airport diagram. It's going to show you the taxiways. You'll notice I took my time, wrote it down for a few seconds, and then read it back. There's nothing wrong with that. Hope you enjoyed this little flight. I tried to go over some things. Feel free to ask any questions. And at some point I will go over, I would like to plan on going over common traffic when you're in an uncontrolled airspace and there's no tower. But right now I'm just renting these airplanes from the local flight school. It's going to be nice when I have my own airplane. Thanks for flying with me.
Before you go anywhere, there are a few things about communicating on the radio that I'd like to add because it can be difficult to talk about everything while also flying the airplane, going over checklists, and looking out for traffic. So here are a few additional things to note. When I was in the pattern, I first reported Cessna 65 Bravo is midfield for touch and go. I mentioned that they're going to tell you whether you're clear for the touch and go or if you need to do something else. What I meant by do something else is sometimes they'll ask you to extend your downwind and they will tell you when it's time to turn your base. And other times I've had to do a left 360 or right 360, in which case I'd make a very slow left 360 or right 360 away from the runway and then re-enter the same downwind around midfield. If they do have you extend your downwind, it would go something like Cessna 5165 Bravo, extend downwind, I'll call your base. That's a pretty common call to be given when you're at midfield to maintain traffic separation. Another common thing when I've been in the pattern is they'll say, Cessna 65 Bravo, clear for touch and go number 2, following whatever airplane you're going to be following. But this means that you're going to be number 2, it could be number 3, or even number 4 to land and so on. You'll acknowledge their call and say, number 2 looking for traffic, and basically you're going to be looking for number 1 traffic now ahead of you. They need to know that you have every plane in sight that is landing before you. So as soon as you have the traffic in sight, you need to report it. If not, you're going to say still looking for traffic. This is all just for everyone's safety because of whatever else is going on in the area you're not familiar with. The tower is more familiar with everything. They're just controlling the traffic for everyone's safety. And the reason to be in the pattern is to practice landings and touch and goes and things like that, of course. But anyways, there's 2 flight schools at the field. It could get very stressful for the tower. It gets super busy. Sometimes I'll request the pattern and they'll say pattern is full, which means there's a maximum capacity of airplanes in it, which could be 4 airplanes or so. In this case, you'll have to leave the airspace and then try to come back when it's not full. The transponder, this guy right here, where you see a 1200, this is known as a transponder code or squawk code. A 1200 is what you keep it on for a VFR flight. The only time you're going to change it is if you're on instrument flight rules, flight plan, flight following, or talking with approach, or basically asked to do so by a controller. Outside of that and a few other codes I'm about to mention, just leave it on 1200 with the setting ALT. This setting tells the transponder to send out not only the 4-digit code that the pilot has set, but also the information on the altitude of the airplane. This is called Mode C. It is very useful to ATC. It's also required to have in airspaces like Class A, B, and C. The other codes to note for the transponder are 7700, which is for emergency situations like Mayday. That's what you'd squawk for a Mayday. 7600 is a code for a loss of communication, lost radio. 7500 is for hijack, so don't squawk 7500 unless you want law enforcement surrounding your airplane when you land. Avoid these numbers, these 3 codes when you're changing your transponder. You don't want to accidentally type them in unless you're meaning to use them. I also mentioned ident. When I was headed back into the airspace, I'm not sure why it didn't work, but I had my transponder set to the alt setting, hit the ident button. For whatever reason, it didn't work, but that's what you're supposed to do when they ask you to ident. You just hit that button. Typically it works, and then they can find you a lot easier on radar. Now, there's going to be some other little things you need to pick up on, like the NATO phonetic alphabet, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Foxtrot, and so forth, and how you present numbers. Like instead of saying 2,500 feet for your altitude, we say 2,500. Instead of saying 9, you say 9er. Some common mistakes to steer clear of: transmitting on the wrong frequency, like accidentally being on tower and talking to ground. Kind of embarrassing. Talking over someone else's transmission. When I first tune to ground or tower, I'm listening for a second to see if anyone is in the middle of a conversation, because you don't want to interrupt in the middle of someone else's conversation with a tower or ground. You need to listen. Once the conversation is over, then you can start your announcement. Another common mistake is having the volume turned down so low that you don't hear the call. Try not to do that. That's why it was hard for me to go over everything while flying, is because I needed to have the volume up. I was trying to listen as well. Be sure to be accurate with your mileage and your location. If you're 10 miles out, don't say you're 15 or 20 miles. Try to be as accurate as possible. I also mentioned that once I was clear of the airspace, you're gonna get cleared to change frequencies, frequency change approved. But if you're gonna be by another airspace, I recommend being on the nearest tower or common traffic frequency, so you're listening to what's going on, listening to where other people are at, the other calls being made. That's gonna make you a safer pilot. It's gonna make you more aware of the traffic in the air. If I'm on a VFR flight and I'm clear of St. Augustine's class Delta, but I'm not going very far away, I just stay on the tower. Another common mistake is some people, I've heard them say yes sir, or they'll say like sir sometimes on the radio. Never say that, because your voice sounds different on the radio. The controller's voices sound different, and sometimes a female can sound like a male. So just don't use the word sir. There's no reason to do it. You can say please or thank you, but I only do that like when I'm done reporting for the day, and you don't want to overuse words. That's another thing, is you don't want to say too much that doesn't need to be said, because it can get very busy. You want to keep it as short as possible. It just takes time, but you'll start to pick up on it. Make that first call. You'll start learning when all the calls need to be made, and it gets a lot more fun. And if you're going to use words like Roger, Wilco, affirmative, negative, look up all these words and how to use them properly. I could talk more about this in the future. Wilco is kind of an old school term. I'm very much into the history, so I like these old school terms, but make sure you know how to use them properly. For now, just like focus on getting the basics down, and then you can build upon that. Now, what if I wanted to transition through the airspace without landing? Well, you can fly over it, in which case you need to check the map for what altitude you need to be at to stay above the airspace. The other option is you could fly around it, just steer clear of it, or call 10 miles out and tell them you're looking to transition through the airspace. Remember the 4 W's: who you're contacting, who you are, where you are, and what you want to do. And the final thing I want to mention is you have the last say as the pilot when you were communicating to the ATC. You tell them what you want to do. And what I mean by that is, if you are in an emergency situation, you can tell them, Cessna 65 Bravo, I need to land right now. And the controller will need to cater to your needs. If you ever feel like the ATC tells you something that is compromising your safety as the pilot, it is your responsibility to tell them you cannot comply and you need to do something else because it's unsafe for whatever reason. I don't think this is very common. I could be wrong, but it's never happened to me before. I just wanted to make that clear that the pilot actually has say over the ATC. You're the one up there flying the airplane, but outside of your safety being compromised, I recommend listening to them because they're all about keeping people safe and maintaining traffic separation. I've always followed their orders, and I've never had an issue with them telling me anything so far that I felt was compromising my safety. Be kind, be a normal person, communicate in a normal conversational tone. Controllers are not robots, they are people. So be respectful like you would to anyone else in any other conversation. Build up to making that first call. You gotta make that first call on the radio. I know I just went over a lot. I threw a lot of information at you, so please ask any questions or add anything you'd like to this. I'd like to do a video on what it's like to report when you're on a common frequency in an uncontrolled airspace. Plan on doing that. I do not have my IFR. I would like to get my IFR. It's just that it costs money, but I'd like to get that one day and just keep, helping you guys out as much as I can. I'm just a VFR private pilot and I love this stuff. So be sure to subscribe to my channel for more aviation videos and adventures and travels. Thanks for watching.